This summer, I found myself roaming the narrow streets of Porto, with the anticipation of a new journey towards Santiago de Compostela. I last visited this city 6 years prior, as a relaxing wind-down after a 500-mile solo walk along the Camino Frances. This time around, I was joined by my wife and 2-year-old son, with our hearts and minds ready to walk the central route of the Camino Portuguese. After picking up our pilgrim's passports at the Porto Cathedral, we launched into the first of a planned 10-day pilgrimage towards Spain. We would journey north and cover 150 miles on a path to the cathedral in Santiago. The first sights of yellow arrows and steps upon cobblestones instantly brought me back to the most memorable summer of my life. The peace of mind found in the rhythm of every step, the cherished volley of Camino greetings with fellow pilgrims, and the anchor of a fixed routine. Knowing the days ahead would only require us to wake up and walk. It was time to make new memories with my newly minted peregrinos. The first stage of the Camino Portuguese leading out of Porto is a demoralizing treadmill of city blocks inlaid with heavy traffic. There were a few nerve-wracking moments where we encountered blind turns on shoulderless roads. I wouldn't have thought twice about such paths on a solo journey, but I was really feeling the responsibilities of parenthood tugging at me around every turn. Owen didn't seem to mind the surroundings one bit though, and after a fast-paced morning, he passed out for a long nap. His timing was perfect, as it allowed Julia and I to increase our walking pace and bolt through the heavy rain that began to fall as we reached our accommodations for the night. Our second day on the Camino started out much like the first. We decided to take a long breakfast in Rates before venturing out into the gray and drizzling skies. We finally got to leave the city streets behind and stepped into the romanticized version of the Camino that I remembered so well. Dirt paths, beautiful trees, and stone walls, leading the way under expressive skies. The sticky paths and mud puddles only added to the pageantry. Having already walked one Camino pilgrimage, it was fun for me to see Owen and Julia experiencing their first. A big part of me wondered how things would be for me with an established point of reference, and from the onset, a quote from T.S. Eliot seemed to hold the answer. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. We stopped for a long lunch in Carvajal before making our way to Barcelos. The sounds coming from the church held us in a trance and pushed us forward to Barcelos and our accommodations for the night. One of my favorite moments from the entire Camino Portuguese is the walk into the town of Barcelos. It starts by crossing the Ponte de Barcelos bridge with a view of the Passo dos Condes, or Palace of the Courts. This building used to be the palace of the Dukes of Braganza until it was destroyed by an earthquake in 1755. From there, we stood in front of the Solar dos Pinheiros, next to a rooster, the symbol of Barcelos. Owen really loved looking at the rooster and decided to transform into one for the next hour. There are many stories as to why the rooster became a significant symbol of Barcelos, but one of the most popular goes like this. A wealthy man threw a big party, and when the party was over, he realized that his sterling cutlery had been stolen by a guest. He accused a pilgrim, and the pilgrim went to court. The pilgrim protested his innocence, but the judge didn't believe him. After the trial, the judge was about to eat a roasted rooster when the pilgrim said, "If I am innocent, this rooster will crow 3 times. The judge did not listen, but just as the pilgrim was about to be hanged, the rooster crowed. On this account, the judge released the pilgrim. The pilgrim returned a few years after and made a statue where the event occurred. That spot is located right here in the town of Barcelos. We left Passo dos Condes and made our way towards our hotel while chasing our little rooster. We were all looking forward to a nice big pilgrim-style dinner, but as is often the case along the way, the Camino had a little extra Camino magic in store for us. On the third day of the Camino Portuguese, we really started to hit our stride as pilgrims. Owen had found a nice rhythm between walking, riding in his stroller, and hitching a ride on our backs. He was also enjoying his status as a Camino celebrity. Word was spreading along the trail and through the albergues of the little boy pilgrim. We were also seeing a lot more pilgrims on trail than we had on our first 2 days of walking. Their company was enjoyed as we shared the views to Balugues, San Martino, and Lugar do Corvo on our way towards Ponte de Lima. The stretch of trail here is mostly natural pathways and dirt roads that took us through some of the most beautiful little farms and vineyards I'd ever laid eyes on. Hiking a solo Camino allows for some incredible moments of introspection, self-evaluation, and life-changing mindfulness. A family Camino is different in that regard, and replaces the journey of the mind with the blessings of togetherness. Time is a precious commodity, and work and life commitments compete to sap as much from us as possible. To be able to spend this much unbroken time together as a family is something I'll cherish forever. I was also brimming with pride and joy at how happy and content my 2-year-old was on his first Camino. He'd been to Iceland, Vietnam, and Cambodia, but I'd be lying if I said I was doubt-free and fully confident he'd be enjoying it so much at the onset. 3 days in, and the only time he didn't have a smile on his face was when he was passed out and napping, dreaming little pilgrim dreams. We ambled along the cobblestone path towards our final destination for the day, when the skies let loose with a drizzle. The Rio Lima and Ponte de Lima bridge were a welcome sight for tired feet. It was time to rest up for the climb up Alto de Portela Grande the following morning. We began our 4th day on the Camino Portuguese by crossing over a 300-meter medieval bridge that dates back to the time of the Romans. I was overwhelmed with the feelings of gratefulness and gratitude. I was personally grateful to be walking another Camino, and also to be able to provide my family with this wonderful adventure. To walk alongside waterfalls, pass through forest, smell wild flowers, and meet like-minded pilgrims overflowing with the same feelings of awe and gratitude, it's an ephemeral sensation that has to be lived out. I realized this when trying to explain my first pilgrimage to non-pilgrims. My frail words collapsed under the weight of what has to be experienced, especially the warmth of words and smiles of every fellow walker. There is nothing quite like the bond of pilgrims.
What your daddy and your mom doing with you, that's amazing.
So when you're 15, don't listen at all to what your parents tell you. You do exactly what you want to do.
The 4th stage of the Camino Portuguese tends to stick out on most pilgrims' itineraries due to the nearly 2,000-foot climb up to Alto de Portela Grande, the high point of the entire Camino Portuguese. The climbing was steep, and it took some real body work to push Owen's stroller over some of the more root-laden and rutted stretches of trail, but we were enjoying the views. This is the kind of hiking we do a lot at home, and it was really nice to leave the asphalt and cobblestone behind for a bit. Although, we don't tend to hike with Owen's toys at home, and he had collected a large dump truck and 2 tractors since we departed Porto. The beautiful surroundings and words of encouragement kept us feeling energized as we continued our journey upward, through the same forest where Napoleon's troops were ambushed during the Peninsular War. Here I come. Here I come. As we finally reached the summit block of Alto de Portela, we were ready to collapse alongside our fellow pilgrims. After that, it was only a short downhill walk at the end of the day to reach our accommodation in Rubiães.
good shape, healthy, and have faith in yourself. Like this. And then you carry on. Don't bring too much because it's heavy in the end.
On day 5 of the Camino Portuguese, we made our way from Rubiães to Valença. After an early morning stretch of walking, we stopped in the town of Fontaura for a coffee break. Owen got the chance to meet a friend and do what all 2-year-olds love to do, play. He may have played a little too hard though, because he went down for a long late morning nap as soon as we walked into the town of Valença, our final stop in Portugal before crossing into Spain. Located along the Minho River across from Spain, Valença is a walled town that played a defensive role in the integrity of Portugal from neighboring Spain throughout the years. Like many towns on the Iberian Peninsula, Valença's origins date back to the Romans. As a pilgrim walking along the way, it can be jarring at times to enter large cities and towns after spending so many miles of solitude in small villages and along isolated dirt paths. Valença has a very different vibe in this regard, with its sprawling fortress walls providing a welcome respite from life on the trail. We spent some time exploring before continuing on through town via roads and tunnels, towards the old international bridge that would take us into Spain. As we made our final approach to the Minho River crossing, we set our final Bom Camino in Portugal and prepared to start saying Buen Camino as we entered Spain via the cathedral town of Tui. Tui is where many pilgrims begin their journey along the Camino Portuguese, much like the town of Sarria along the Camino Frances. Right now we're reaching the halfway point of the Camino Portuguese, leaving the town of Valença and entering into Tui, which also signifies the border crossing from Portugal to Spain. As we made our way into Spain over the Minho, it was a great time to reflect and think back on our first week of walking along the way. All of my doubts and worries about walking with a 2-year-old had vanished as my son grew into his role as a pilgrim. He seemed to be loving every second of the walk. The only concern still on my mind was thinking about how we were going to carry all of the cars, trucks, and tractors he was accumulating in each place we stopped. The first stages in Spain after leaving Tui consisted of many unpleasant asphalt roads through industrial zones. The tranquility of the Camino started to return a bit as we made it to the town of Redondela. We then set out to hike 2 separate inclines, totaling more than 1,400 feet of vertical gain. At the top of the climb, we reached Alta de Lamba, where we saw a wall of Camino shells and a few photos with handwritten notes from the many pilgrims that passed through here before us. The lush green forest and views of the Ria Vigo pulled us ahead. We wanted to enjoy this downhill path as much as we could, because we knew a dangerous stretch of road walking along the N550 highway was ahead. From the guidebook, I knew it wasn't a long highway walking section, but it would have us a few feet from traffic flying by at highway speed. After reaching the final stages of safety along the dirt walking paths on this stretch, we packed away all of our gear and got ready to literally hit the road. The highlight of the day was a stop in the beautiful city of Arcade after walking along N550 highway, and the crossing of a bridge from Arcade to Apante. Bridge crossings are one of my favorite parts of the Camino. The start and finish, while crossing over an otherwise impassable obstacle, makes for the perfect metaphor of the Camino experience. As we crossed over the bridge towards Apante, a gentleman stopped us and told me that he recognized me from my YouTube video about the Camino Frances. He was from the States as well, and introduced us to a pilgrim friend of his from Germany. We stopped and talked for a while before continuing on together towards Pontevedra. Our day concluded at an albergue on the outskirts of Pontevedra, where we got to watch Spain take on Portugal in the group stages of the World Cup. Our 8th day on the Camino Portuguese began with a crossing of the Ponte de Burgo bridge on our way out of Pontevedra. It wasn't long until we reached a secluded stretch of forested trail on our way towards Caldas de Reis. As we left the wooded area behind, the way took us through farms and vineyards, bringing all of my son's farm animal books to life. A friendly horse pulled us off of the trail for a long midday break, and instantly became Owen's favorite member of our extended Camino family. Moments like these are the essence of Camino magic. The bond between everyone and everything along the trail never ceases to amaze. We said goodbye to the horse and sheep at least 3 or 4 times before making our way onto the path towards Santiago. The miles of walking in and out of each town tend to be the most forgettable part of each Camino stage in my opinion. But the entrance to Caldas de Reis is an obvious exception. The beautiful approach over the Rio Muxia was a fantastic stretch of walking, and brought us to our accommodations for the night, in the enchanting medieval part of town. We started bright and early the following morning with the solemn excitement of our second to last day on the trail. As we made our way to Padron, we knew we were only 1 day away from Santiago. Much like the smell before rain, we could sense and feel the energy building amongst every pilgrim that we passed, and in every cafe that we entered. I remembered feeling this emotion along the Camino Frances, and struggled to put it into words when I returned home. It's like the warm feeling of a pleasant memory, combined with the loss of something you don't yet have. Observing that emotion on my first Camino was a personal breakthrough for me, as it really helped in slowing things down and taking in every moment. That pilgrim mindset is one of the most valuable things I brought home from Santiago on my first journey. As we walked along the dirt pathways leading out of Caldas de Reis, we enjoyed the company of pilgrims we had seen and spent time with over the past week. Even though we all walk our own Camino, it's hard not to feel like we're all in on a shared experience together. My son had found the perfect rhythm of walking, riding in his stroller, and hitching a ride on our backs. Having those 3 options helped break up the daily routine and allowed for on-demand naps and breaks, followed up by cafe stops with tortilla bocadillos, assorted baked goods, and beverages to keep us fueled up and ready to walk. After our lunch, we continued on through a forested part of the trail, knowing we had 4 miles of asphalt and cobblestone heading into Padron. Those miles during the early days of any Camino can be hard on the feet and legs. We were well conditioned at this stage from our 9 days of walking since leaving Porto. We also had the magnetic draw of the Santiago Cathedral pulling us forward. Owen fell asleep for his second nap of the day as we pushed ahead into the final miles before reaching Padron. We began planning for a second lunch of pizza upon entering town, and were mentally preparing for our 10th and final day. We began our journey in Portugal, and only 16 miles stood between us and Santiago.
Buen Camino, borda, todo. Venga, vamos.
Our final day on the Camino Portuguese began with an aura of magic in the air. The energy of the Camino spirit had the town of Padron buzzing with excited pilgrims, all one big family. We were all walking towards Santiago, with only 16 miles remaining before we reached the hallowed cathedral. As we walked past the flow of traffic along the N550, I thought back to my final day on the Camino Frances and how much I wanted that moment in my life to last forever. The freedom of the journey, the beauty of everything around me, the charm of fellow pilgrims, and the process of becoming a better version of myself. And here I was, with a chance to relive that special moment and share it with my family. while watching them experience the Camino transformation in their own way. The miles flew by as we took in the views, ate bocadillos, drank coffee, and cherished the company of our extended pilgrim family that had grown in size since leaving Porto 10 days before. The energy of the Camino that started building in Padron reached a fevered pitch as we entered the city of Santiago de Compostella along Rua Fonseca. The magnetism of the cathedral pulled us forward through the southern door, with my son leading the charge. The main square of the cathedral, called Praça do Obradoiro, is divine ground, and is the location that all pilgrim routes to Santiago converge. I looked around to see new and familiar faces, a sea of elation and relief for newly arriving pilgrims, and also the forlorn partings of Camino families that grew close along the way and now had to part. But through that sea of Camino magic, I could only see my son. At only 2 years old, the boy pilgrim walked through rain, wind, and sun from Porto to Santiago over 150 miles, and loved every minute of it. We took off our packs, parked the stroller, and looked up at the western facade of the cathedral. My son's toy collection grew along every stage, and he wasted no time bringing the toys out to play. After checking into our hotel, we made our way to the pilgrim's office, our stamped Camino passports in hand to obtain our Compostelas. Like every other stage of our Camino experience, the boy pilgrim brought smiles and happiness to everyone around. After receiving our Compostelas, we made our way back out into the streets of Santiago to enjoy the sights. But like many pilgrims have said before, no matter how hard you try to avoid it, every step you take seems to pull you back towards the cathedral. There is a magic to it that you just have to accept. We enjoyed the views until evening, and were excited to return the following morning for the Pilgrim's Mass. We arrived to Mass early, and while we were seated, saw many of the pilgrims we grew close with over the preceding days. To share the Pilgrim's Mass with our extended family is a moment we'll never forget. To Marco, Amira, Felix, Peter, Mary, John, and many more, Buen Camino. When I walked the Camino Frances in 2012, I continued on by foot to Finsterre. I found it a fitting spiritual cooldown to unpack the 500 miles worth of emotions I built up from St. Jean to Santiago. There is something about seeing that 0-kilometer Camino marker that provides a satisfying finality to the pilgrimage. Seeing my son reach the cathedral this time around provided all of that and more. So instead of walking, we took a day trip out to Finsterre and Muxia. The rocky peninsula of Cape Finsterre is rich with history, and was once thought to be the physical end of the world. For pilgrims in the flow of walking daily for weeks on end, there really is no farther you can go. It was at this point 6 years prior that my mind finally told my body it was okay to stop. This time around, I was happy to enjoy the sights as a spectator. Our final destination on the day was a stop in Muxia, when it dawned on all of us that this was it. The unbroken time we spent as a family I will cherish forever. The friends we met along the way will forever be in our hearts, and the sights of Portugal and Spain remain vivid in our minds. I said after my walk on the Frances that being a pilgrim is not just what you do, it is who you are and what you've become. This goes beyond the individual, and is a blessing that can enrich a family as well. The Camino brought us closer together. Just as I remembered, the Camino provides. This will be a place we can come to grow and to learn as the years pass by. I look forward to seeing Santiago again, and the people we'll meet along the way. Buen Camino.